ceremony for the bronze bust of Stanley and Tom Wick. I'm David Hassler, director of the Wick Poetry Center, and this is Bob Wick, one of our co-founders. He and his brother Walt founded this center in 1984 in memory of their sons, Stanley and Tom. It's a real honor today to have Bob here with his niece, Rebecca Wick Rogers, not only to dedicate these beautiful bronze busts that now will be permanently in our Stan and Tom Wick Library and Wick Poetry Center, but also for him to give a little artist talk about his work as a sculptor. We have Seated Earth in our Poetry Park, which is an absolutely beautiful piece of Bob Wick's work, and to talk about his creative process for creating living bronze. So I'm just going to hand it over to Bob, and there will be time for question and answers after his talk. So thank you, Bob, for being here.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay. I want to again thank President Warren, Provost Dyson, Provost Tankersley, and Dean Blank, particularly, for allowing all of this to happen and the Wick Poetry Center to be what it has become today. It's probably my phone. Is it? Yeah. Yeah. This is probably my fourth broken nose. I just broke it. So I had two brothers, one that broke it with a baseball bat and the other one that re-broke it and straightened it out with his fist, accidentally. So I've had a lot of broken noses, and I've also been kicked in the nose. So it's par for the course for me. Anyway, I think I'm going to begin with the beginning. And one of my first memories was my father. At 5 years old, I sat on his lap, and I said, "Dad, would you draw a house for me, or a ball?" And so he proceeded to do that. But he didn't draw a flat house or ball. He drew it in 3 dimensions. And that, at 5 years old, left its mark. When I was in the first grade, the following year, I'm drawing 3-dimensionally. And of course, the children are looking over my shoulder and saying, "Hey, what's that? How do you do that? How do you make that shape? How do you make it?" Obviously, in my particular case, my mind has a 3-dimensional reality. At 10 or 12 years old, I wanted to be an architect. I was conscious of Frank Lloyd Wright. My mother gave me that suggestion. I was drawing houses all the time. I'm jumping a little bit, and I'm going to go back now just to give you an idea where it begins, because in my mind, if we want to find ourselves, we look to our childhood, because in my particular case, a lot of it was all there. And as I talk this talk, I'll try to relate that a little bit more. Anyway, I live 6.5 miles on a dirt road, and a bad dirt road. This is on the property. It's a mountain I call Deux Poitrines, two breasts in French, my understanding. And it is beautiful, exotic land, mountain lions, codamundis, that you may not know, javelinos, rattlesnakes, lots of them. But it's essential to my mind and my spirit and my inspiration. So I'm going to run through some shots. All of these shots were taken on my phone. Actually, it's a Samsung, not a 7 or 6. But these were all taken within a year, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 photographs. So virtually everything, in fact, most of them were taken within the last 3 months. So anyway, give you a sense of the magnificent beauty of the landscape where I live. We have great rainbows. That mountain's in Mexico. When I drive down my road, I look right into that mountain. At San Jose Peak, about 8,100 feet high. Reminds me of a George Inness painting to a great extent. That's my road going up to my house. You can see how crude it is, but we also have great, wonderful rainstorms, particularly in the monsoon. This is San Jose Peak again, but with clouds. This is a back canyon that is on the property. I might mention there's 2,800 acres of property. So, and you think, gee whiz, you spent a lot of money on it. No, I could buy 40 acres at $3,000. These big rocks are from a major earthquake that happened probably in the 1880s and dropped off a mountain. But they're my Stonehenge in a lot of ways. I'm not sure. This is the back canyon from the back canyon, and right in here would be the house that we'll eventually see. It's basically surrounded by almost, let's say, 300 degrees of mountains with a canyon opening. Many times I used to live when I would be across the valley when I was working in the newspapers, I could look and actually see this canyon. And rainstorms, literally, the rainstorm would drop right in this canyon. It's called a hot spot sometimes because of the nature of the landscape, the shape of it. And so it always has wonderfully lush. Now, I live at 5,339 feet, so I'm over a mile high. And the landscape at that altitude certainly is much more lush. We have pines, junipers, mesquite, trees, and wonderful grasslands, I show this picture because this tree I planted, or I had planted. We planted 20,000 seedlings on this tree, on this mountain. These are both 20 to 30 feet high. That's a wash, what's called a wash. A wash is more or less a dry stream bed. And, but the fact that there's more water, the height of those trees, this tree here, which is, I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm bad at buttons here, is probably only 8 or 10 feet high. Because it's on a knoll, it doesn't get as much moisture. Of the 20,000 I planted, probably only 500 alive. But it makes that land that much more richer, and it allows the animals, including deer and other animals, to have greater vegetation to feed on. These are succulents, are mescal, which are often used for tequila. And but it so happened that the Indians often grouped and had clusters of these, which they utilized prior to contemporary man being there. Sometimes when we have great and wonderful cloudy days in the monsoon or spilling clouds that come over the peaks, this shot was taken from my house, right from my house. You get that almost Japanese wood carving or Japanese print quality that is absolutely glorious. Another shot. We have some horses. No one rides them. They live a wonderfully lush life. All they do is eat and mosey around. Anyway, you can see here, and this is part of the back canyon. This is a view, that's the edge of the house, a walkway. This is actually a platform. There's a corner that has a lot of vegetation, so that's where it is. But this is my view looking back there. And you can actually see right here a water tank for the cattle. We also have a few cattle, about 12 to 15 cattle that are on the land. This is the living room, walking down from the canyon. The house is basically 3 parts: pyramid, trapezoid, right angle, triangle. Having never designed a house before, I knew that I had to deal with basically primary shapes. And so we worked on this house in design for 9 years. And then my architect said to me, Bob, are you going to die first or are you going to ever build this? So I said, okay, I guess I'll try and build it. This is part of the wall. You can see the person there giving a little bit of scale. That's a sculpture. There's a sculpture there. There's a sculpture here. Those walls were basically put up there to have a platform to put sculptures on, because I wanted to, I was always in love with the idea, the Greek idea of architecture and sculpture uniting and being one together. Not in the same way the Greeks did it, but finding a bond and a union with one another in their message of three-dimensional beauty. This is a stairwell, that stairwell going up. This is part of one of the sculptures called Open. It's spread like this, and it's open as an invitation to come to the house, basically, through this coming up the stairwell. This is a planter. Oops, here I go again. Oh my goodness, Bob Wick, you mess up. Oh, oh gosh. Excuse me, I am not good. Oh, good Lord, I'm going crazy. I apologize. I'm really bad at technological things. So you'll have to suffer with me a minute. Okay, this is a, oh my goodness, I went too far. God, I'll get it sooner or later. This is a planter, which is 120 feet long, and actually carries living plants and trees. You can see up there, that's a cholla, and there's all sorts of plants that are in that. You'll see more of it. And it really acts as a bond to bring all the buildings together and to create wonderful shaded areas. Because in Arizona, shade is enormously important. And when you can walk in the shade, but not only that, you can't see it here very well, and I'm not quite sure I guess I can give an idea as we go to the next couple of photos. You can see that sky. The sky is enormous out there, intensely blue, overpowering. And the planter, which were actually right here, the part of it, oh God, here we go again. Well, this is it. I apologize. I get impassioned with what I'm saying and I forget what I'm doing. Good combination for Bob Wick. This planter here makes this wonderful walk space and protects you, literally protects you from the sky. So you have a sense of intimacy and comfort and not being overwhelmed by the overpowering landscape, because it is. This piece here is called After the Birth. These are plants, these are prickly pear, they're growing out of it. And it was inspired for the birth of my last child, Francis. The stomach is torn open, and it indicates that the child has come forth. And the idea was that the woman is the Buddha. She accepts her state of being in the act of acceptance. And anyway, so it was kind of dedicated to that. You can see the stratification here. These are probably 25, 35 million years old. But I say that because stratification is an important part of the lines and linear quality that I put in my sculpture. And it is a message of the layering of our lives psychologically, physically, geologically, yes. Not only the geology of the earth, the geology of ourselves. But anyway, I won't elaborate too much on that, but you can see these small sculptures here. In fact, this is the back of the model for the big sculpture over there. That was, anyway, this is the kind of part of the court. This piece is not too large, about 3 feet. It's called Succulent Stairway. You can see the plant growing out of it here. And this piece over here, which is a real pride of mine, is a 5-foot piece. I know it looks like a maze of living plants, and it is. But that cholla here started about that tall, and you'll see a picture of it when it's small. It has grown through. It's called praying plantus. It means praying plants. The plants are in prayer, the sculpture is in prayer. It's a union of the two. And the lushness of what happened, those plants have been there for 5, 6 years. They keep growing and growing. It's magnificent. To me, it is, because it shows who and what we are. Biologically, hey, we have DNA, the plants have DNA. We're one and the same. So why are we separating and thinking, that's over there and we're over here? We're all one, you know. This is the centerpiece. This is called, this is really about the house, but I'll quickly, this is called spring. It actually is a fountain. Water spills on the inside and spills out. The internal space is like the internal space of ourselves. And the water is representative coming from the inside of ourselves, the water of life, the life of ourselves. Those are sunburst locusts, by the way, that were up on the left, and they are a plant that grows up here. I love them. They're one of my favorite trees because they are gold in the spring, green in the midsummer, and gold in the fall. Sunburst locusts. This is another view. You can see here the tall peak. That's sort of like the steeple of my house, which would be the steeple of the church. It's actually a small studio where I make models. This is the guest house. I was particularly proud of this part of the architecture because I put in it, I put this big sharp swath that cut, because a right angle triangle is a pretty boring shape. But with that, and then this window that leaned backward, it really created a very dynamic space there for that building and made the building come to life much more dramatically. This piece is called Arizona Circle. And anyway, you can kind of get an idea of the center courtyard. This is another part of it with shaded. It gives you a feeling of you can sit and relax and enjoy in the shade. Now, I have to say that a fellow by the name of Lalo from Mexico, who has a green card and has worked with me now for 11 years, he has, not only is he a dynamic worker, you never have to tell this guy anything. He just always is working. But not only that, he takes phenomenal pride in what he creates because he does create the plants. And he's given me a greater vision of what the union of these sculptures and plants can be, which I didn't have before. So he's expanded my vision just by his love of plants and his super green thumb. This is our kitchen. The house, oops, well, we kind of go back there. Let's see. The kitchen, I better watch out not touch myself. The kitchen is round, and it's round because in the process of designing this house over 9 years, one wise old woman who was a friend of the family looked at that and she said, well, it's all planes, no curves. So I thought, yeah, God, she's right. So I started designing and bringing curves into the house, bringing curves into the planter, bringing curves into the major walls. And it really brought a new, greater richness to the architecture itself. It's the center of the house. There's a fireplace here, television up there, a wonderful place, and your vista is magnificent. They actually put reinforced rebar all the way around here, so if you notice, it has no mullions. It's just plane to plane to plane to plane. Cherry wood, which is one of my favorites. And this is the hallway. One of the hallways. You can see the small sculptures here. It's lined with small sculptures throughout. And it has a fountain, which I'll show you on this side, and then part of the deck here. And then that's going into the living room. This is a piece that's called Right Heart. The Gila Wilderness is one of the great unknowns of the Southwest in New Mexico. It's enormously large, and I think was the first wilderness area defined as a wilderness area in the United States. One of the ones. I may not have quite the right term, but anyway, I was camping there, and one day it was in a deep arroyo, And here, spilling down the side of the mountain, or rock facing, was all this water dropping over the stratification. And I thought, God, how can I translate that into a piece of sculpture? Well, then shortly thereafter, I was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and upstairs they have these large ceramic Buddhas from China. And I thought, yeah, I can use the girth of the Buddha and make the facing of the torso kind of recreate that strata. So that's, this is a fountain. Unfortunately, it's not running. It runs beautifully, and it is a wonderful piece. The stratification, you can see it running across here. Stalactites, stalagmites, crossed legs. This large protrusion that bursts out is the heart, but it's on the right side. I thought, yeah, let's have the right heart. That's my right heart sculpture. Anyway. I also mentioned this plant has been in this since we put it in place, which is about 12 years now. So some of these plants we had to replant because we had a phenomenal freeze for 5 days. And I mean, it hardly went above freezing for 5 days in southern Arizona. And it destroyed thousands and thousands of plants throughout the whole Southwest. Anyway, but that's still some years back. This is a view from the living room. The cupola, the window, looking, that's exactly due north. So you have a minimum amount of sun that comes in the summertime. And therefore, you can keep the room relatively cool because of that. But it's a double canyon, basically goes back in there, and there's very dramatic, these are dramatic rock formations that are up in here, and this is the stratified mountain you saw before. But the fact of the matter is that this starts in the morning, the sun comes from up here, comes down, so it's all golden. Then as the day moves along, the arc of the sun changes, and this mountain becomes darker and darker and darker, and that becomes more and more golden. So it's always in change. It is glorious to lie, for instance, on a chair and look at those clouds and mountains. I never saw this before, and maybe some of you have. But have you ever seen clouds go like this? They move to the left, they stop, and they move back the same way? I saw that. Has anyone ever seen that? I've never seen it. I was so startled, like it just right in front of me. I viewed the weather change 180 degrees as far as wind. And on rainy days, it's even more glorious. This is a view really from up high in the house, looking down, and gives you an idea that you can see the pool and the steeple, 46 feet high. I have to say that in a lot of ways, this could never have been done if the newspaper business and my brother was successful, and my family who supported me. This is, shall we say, my contribution. Hopefully, the world will enjoy it. I've tried to by bringing students up to the house, and I hope that I can continue to do that over the years, and that someday it can be part of the community, and that they can enjoy it, because that's what I'm trying to do. It's my minuscule contribution, hopefully, for the beauty of the world and a wonderful piece of architecture. At least, hopefully, I'm not presumptuous on that. But anyway, another view. You see all the vegetation again coming out of praying plantas. This is the model of it. I wanted to give you that because you really can't photograph the house as one unit. It's just because it's very long, as you can see. I broke my bank on it. I'll let you know. You live and you learn, and you make the wrong choices. I'll just throw this out. Remember this: the contractor has done hundreds of houses. You've done them one in your life. Guess who has the advantage? Anyway, and I had a bad contractor. Fortunately, I had an architect who worked very hard to try and keep it online. Anyway, that gives you an idea. This is oh goodness, here we go again. Oh, well, I can use this. Here, gee whiz. This here is the guest house. That's the small studio. This is the right angle, trapezoid here. And in it is the kitchen, the dining room, in this area, some bedrooms, and then the walkway and the living room and office. There was an office in there. And you can see here the planter that binds all of these together. I want to say, you saw the color there. My wife, on the final creation of the house, did all the color inside and out. I'm colorblind, so you don't ask me to do something like that. I mean, my conception of the house originally was, oh, it's all going to be gray. Excuse me, how dull. In the Southwest, not so. You can use wonderful, vibrant colors, and it really is a very exciting house visually, color-wise, as a result of that. These are drawings. In the process of doing this, I did some drawings to try and put together an idea what the house would look like. You can see at this stage, oh, no. Here we go. I'm going to go back. Here is the pyramid. Had an idea about that. Here's the right angle triangle, but really had a tough time to figure out how I was going to do this center area. And went through a whole lot of different ideas and drawings as a result of that. These are some drawings, variations of trying to put together that idea of the center area. And in this particular case, this is the dining room, this is the kitchen. And these are some other drawings along that line. And I think I included this one particularly because I felt like this was the most, this one right here. Just a line drawing was probably the most accurate of what it would end up being. It was interesting how the house imitates the landscape. These points here are very similar. On the edge of the mountains, there are 4 peaks, which I didn't identify at the time. But after the house was up and I'm looking, I say, my God, this is echoing a lot of the shapes of the landscape. The planter, which is 120 feet long and goes from 7 feet, to 12 feet. And the reason for that was I wanted to break up the flatness of this roof to imitate the landscape as it was changing, because you have sharp, high edges of the mountains, and you have cascading with the flowing of the landscape that way. So it breaks it up so it has a greater union into the landscape. Another shot of a drawing. Still hadn't resolved the center of it. Drawing is a foundation for my thinking. I draw all the time. I've drawn, probably for every sculpture I make, I've drawn 50 to 100 drawings. And so I'm going to go through some quick drawings just to give you an idea of some drawings that I've done, and probably within the last few years. This one is basically a figure on a table, a kind of organic table. And this figure here would float, so you'd have space out behind that, so it would actually float out in front of it. And you can see the different plants that even in the conception, I try to think of what kind of plants can I use for these sculptures. And putting the plants in the sculpture at the end. In other words, I've made the bronze, everything's ready. It's the plants. It's the most exciting moment of all because you can see the thing come to full life at that moment. And I want to say, I didn't say this. Plants in my sculptures and in my art and life are not decorative. That's not the point. The point is they are to speak of this union we have with everything that lives, everything. And science, whether it's biology or physics or whatever it may be, is revealing all this bonding, all this part of what we are, just an extension. I've often said, We are only a recent manifestation of the earth. Just a recent manifestation. But all of this life, we're it, it is us. This is the idea of a bouquet figure. But the upper part is filled with life. Now, you can see here with all the wonderful plants that are native to this area. So it doesn't matter where the sculptures are. You can put your plants in it to bring life to the sculptures. But remember, a fern is soft and gentle. A succulent is acute and sharp. Those are emotionally real realities. You put one plant in something, and you change those plants, you change the sculpture. And that's the way it should be. Because it's all the variations of what we see in the plants and in the sculptures and in ourselves. Because we're infinite in our variety of thinking and feeling. Okay. This is actually I'm working on a big plaster of this. Pop that one too fast. Just quickly, I call it something like Southwest landscape, seated landscape. And it is a large figure, it's 10 feet tall, and it carries the vegetation of the Southwest. And it sort of floats in space. It's like, we come up from the earth, and we did come up from the earth. And we assumed this new kind of reality, or old kind of reality. This piece is called sort of like, it's sort of like a mountain Buddha. And it's shaped like a mountain. I mentioned all the stratification. Again, the layers of our mind, the layers of psychology, the layers of our biology, the layers of our geology. It's all in us. This is called, actually, it's a dream. And I often have said, until you can grow a tree in your heart, you'll never understand the oneness of all things. So this is literally growing a tree from his heart. And this is, you remember the yellow piece? Well, this is the drawing for that. The large version, here we go. The large version would be about 8 feet tall, and it have a saguaro as a head. Even though it's called Succulent Stairway, it's still basically a kind of figure that's seated in space with a saguaro as a head. Think of a saguaro as a head. Think of all the implications of what that is. This one was interesting. I showed this to a woman who does my graphics a great deal of the time. And I said, this one you can say, I think the name of this is Where Life Begins. And one person could take, well, this is a male suggestion. She said, it's just as much a female suggestion because life comes from that area, whether it's male or female. And she was right. And, got breasts in a way, or suggestive of breasts to some degree. This is kind of a Buddha-like figure, which the arms would be filled with life. Notice how the head, again, has the acute succulent suggestions, which is almost that aura or exploding of the mind in spirit and in spirituality. I call this full of life. 2 breaths, not 2 breaths, but 4 breaths, and plants just growing off of it all over. A reclining figure. We all know the reclining figure is thousands and thousands of years old. This is my reclining figure. It's named Up from the Earth. But it's cantilevers. I love cantilever. I love cantilevering is something I can do as a sculptor because nature can only cantilever so much, and then it collapses. But through steel, reinforcement, and bronze, we can cantilever things wonderfully out in space. the cantilevers that are coming out. That's what makes this building dynamic. Imagine taking those cantilever projections that are off this building. The hot building would be very dull, but it's those dynamic angled cantilevers that give it life. I would probably, if I were to complete this piece, I would actually put a kind of table in here, just like I did over there, so you could actually sit, and the tree would shade you, so you'd actually sit on the piece itself. And this is another one I called Cantilever Skate, but I also think a name for it is like into space or up into space, because that's where we're going. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to be on the astronomy board at the University of Arizona, and I see the wonders, absolute wonders of astronomy, of the universe, and what's going on. And, you know, I was on this board probably 20 years, and 20 years ago, there were no such things as exoplanets. And I remember everyone just sort of, the astronomers, I mean, they were looking at brown dwarfs, they were looking at all sorts of astronomical reality, asteroids, this, that, black holes, but the idea that life was out there, they just kind of didn't think too much about it. Suddenly, exoplanets occur, and now it's this enormous push to find life out there. And we'll do it, not in my lifetime probably, but maybe in a lot of your lifetimes, or shortly thereafter. At least some reality that it's out there. And this is, in a sense, the idea, in a lot of ways, that this reclining figure is now leaving the Earth, and it's moving into space, and it's carrying life. It's carrying its life, just like we're finding out that asteroids carry life, or potential of life. Amino acids that bring life, and possibly brought life to Earth. So it's a movement of that way, too. Real quick, I'll try and go through these. These are ideas that you sit inside the sculpture, that you become, if you want to say, one with it, and you find solace and peace and tranquility, and looking over a landscape, or looking over, hopefully, a wonderful, beautiful scene. Because we don't spend enough time looking into that world that is inside of us and outside of us. And we need to do that more. So that's what this is. I use that figure to give an idea of that. And another variation of that. Probably, certainly this one, the next couple ones, certainly influenced by Gaudi, the great architect, Spanish architect, who was constantly, I am in awe of. I think his church, Sagraria, I'm terrible. Anyway, the great church in Barcelona is one of the greatest three-dimensional objects man has ever made, period, without a doubt. Here we go. Same thing. You could sit in the side. I'd put a seat back there. I'd probably even add some trees in the back to give you shade. Obviously, more so in a Gaudi-esque somewhat quality. Just a little funny little things with saguaros, and these are acatillos on the right that are here on the left. And a wonderful plant. There's only two kinds in the world, two plants in the world that actually reproduce their leaves multiple times in a single year. Acatillos do that. And I've got literally probably 10,000 of them on my property. This is kind of a playground here. This is an idea. Now that's actually, this piece was, we had a major fire, and I don't know if you remember that, but down the southwest in our area, it was, what is it called? Well, they had a name for it particularly. It damaged 53, burned 53 homes down. And our house escaped it, but in the process, I knew or had an idea it was coming, and I moved a bunch of sculptures out on a concrete platform, thinking that if my studio got on fire, at least I could save these big pieces I had worked so hard on. Well, the fire came in, believe me, Fires of that nature are totally unpredictable. The fire came in, went around the studio, caught on the bases of the sculptures or on the concrete platform, and burned them all down. I lost 2 or 3 years of work. But the interesting part about was, this was one of them. And fortunately, we reworked it and was able to put it together and survive. It's molded, but it's not cast. But I took the photograph of the original plaster and drew trees on it and plantings to give an idea of what it was like, and had a figure in it to give a sense of scale. I always like sense of scale. Do you ever stand next to a giant person? Do you ever sense what that's about? And I was probably Canfield Fair, when I was probably 5 years old, 6 years old. There was a giant who was at the Canfield Fair who was 8 feet tall. And I'll never forget, I mean, that left an impression on me. I couldn't get over the power of the scale of this man. I mean, and if these giant basketball players, you stand up next to them, you think, my God, they're superhuman beings physically. That scale is important in sculpture. You know, if that were 5 feet tall, you'd hardly think much about it. It's 12 feet tall. Scale, I mean, let's take an ant. You look at an ant and say, oh, there it is, spit on it. If it was 15 feet tall, you wouldn't be spitting on it. It's a different reality. Scale is enormously important in the size of a sculpture. What size you pick, what size you choose to portray it in. I included this drawing, excuse me. I included this drawing because I did the head, but at the time I was reading a book that was a wonderful, The Lost Battles by Jonathan Jones, Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. But this quote is from Leonardo da Vinci. I read this book. At the time I read it, I wrote this down on this drawing because I felt such a kinship to it. Now, it says, man has been called by the ancients a little world, and certainly the name is well given. For if a man is made of earth, water, air, and fire, so is this body of the earth. If man has in him bones that hold up his flesh, so the rocks hold up the earth. If man has in him a lake of blood, where the lungs increase and decrease in breathing, the body of the earth has its ocean, which similarly rises and falls. Around 1490. 3 years before I ever read this, I wrote this. Not because I'm a Da Vinci, I am not, but because sometimes there are kinships in the way we think with others who thought before us. We humans are structured like the earth we come from. The earth has strata of rocks and dirt. Our strata are genetics and personal environment. The earth has earthquakes. We have love, birth, and death. The earth has volcanoes. We have pain, violence, and creation. It all comes from beneath. The evolution of the earth is a pulsating heart of mankind. Both earth and humankind grow new forms, new life, and new states of being. Both are always in change. We and the earth are shaped by the energy and forces put upon and within. We are only a recent manifestation of the earth's evolutionary force. And the part we play is the conscious earth. Anyway, that was an inspiration to me to find that, and enriched me. This piece is called Life in Space. And you can see that the feet, and it's kind of a Buddha-like figure, but life is growing out of the piece and it's suspended in space. This is the plaster. Not completely finished. We're going to probably a little bit more detailing. Hopefully I can cast it someday. It's probably about 7.5 feet tall, approximately. This piece is called The Life of My Arms. Think about a sculptor. Where is the life? It's in the arms. The mind, the arms. That's what we create. That's what we make. These are the things we use it with. In this particular case, it would have plants growing out of the arms, all the way up to the shoulders, and bursting out of the head. I was wondering about this. When I drew this, I thought, my God, can people get their arms, legs in that shape? And my daughter, Rosemary, who is involved in yoga, I said, Rosie, can you do that? She immediately went down and did it. And she said, yeah, it's called the standing lotus. So it's kind of nice to discover it after the fact. I show these pieces because everything you see here has never been cast in bronze. But it's sitting in my studio. I wasn't the most successful promoter of my work, let's put it that way. Anyway, this is a piece that you just see the side of it. Again, it has its legs crossed, but out of here, there will be a tree that grows up over the head. And that tree will be a symbol of, it's called in my own shade or in my own shadow. The shadows and shades of ourselves that come up and grow over us, and we sometimes find great richness and great sadness by them. This one is called Split Life, Life Split. Down the middle, filled with plants and trees. Anyone have a split life around here? Ever experienced some aspect of it? Yeah. The fact of the matter is that often in that split is where the new creation comes from. It's in those struggles, in those places. Like the tectonic plates, where the splits occur, that's where volcanic eruption goes, but new life occurs, new realities occur. This was to give you a sense of scale in the studio. This young lady is a friend of my son's, and I really wanted her in it just to give a sense of scale. This is a 10-foot walking figure, and this was that piece, Life in Space. Okay, these are kind of so. Okay, there's my studio, all uncast. Pretty full. There's probably a couple hundred pieces in there. But it does give you an idea of, I want to give a little tribute to this fellow who has worked with me for 30 plus years. And I appreciate all he's done for the years. But these are a number of pieces, of which many of them are ready for casting, but at this stage I've sort of run out of money. That happens in life. Anyway, this is another view. And in this, I also want to include a sort of side view of the portrait I'm doing of my wife. Now, I'm doing this strictly in plaster, so I'm not even doing it in clay. And it's, anyway, I think it's going to be about 7.5 feet tall. I really think that it will hopefully be quite a beautiful thing. I still have some work to do on the face and the eyes a little bit. I have never, at this point, sat her down in front of me and done it. I've done some drawing, but I've never actually had her done there and work on the plaster. The arms are inspired by really some ancient Chinese pieces of figures that have drapery that goes almost to the ground. And, this part here would be plants. So, hey, whatever the mood is, however she is, I can put prickly pear up there, I can put a beautiful flower. Okay, let's see here. And here is, this is one of those large pieces you can see from the drawing where you'd actually walk inside of it, sit down, and it'd have trees. And another extension of that idea, where a place of contemplation inside the sculpture. Unfortunately, this was destroyed in that fire. But Anyway, that gives you a sense of it. It's probably about 13, 14 feet high. Okay. This is a bronze. It's 15 feet high. It's called Arroyo Rising. We talked about a wash. We talked about an arroyo is like a wash or a little waterway in the west, which 95% of the time has no water in it. But in this case, it has risen up and carried the plants and plant life with it. Because I'm colorblind, I was terrified of color for many years. But somewhere along the way, I went on one of the lakes in Arizona and saw these rock formations with mineral spillings that inspired me to try and be bold and try some of that spilling kind of quality onto my work, and with colors that ordinarily I would never have considered. How did I get into sculpture? Well, I'm at Kent State University. I'm a junior in college. I'm home for Christmas. And I have an Aunt Dodie, who is a off-Broadway actress. She's there with her husband. She says, talk about strange chance. I happen to go to a Five and Dime store and buy some Play-Doh. I'm doodling with Play-Doh. And she comes in and she says, what are you doing? She says, well, I'm making these little heads. She says, oh, do a portrait of my husband. Well, I was absolutely dumbfounded. I said, God, I've never done anything like that. I couldn't do that. No. Tomorrow, we go down to the newspaper. We take pictures of my Jimmy, her husband, and then you go back to Kent State University, and you go to the art department, and you work on this. And I said, oh, all right, I did. So I followed through. Mr. Bouse, who is here, Paul Bouse, helped me on getting started. And once I did the portrait, the life that I saw in the head and the fact that I could create it so close to the reality of who the person was, I couldn't stop. I had to go grab everybody I could see to do portraits. Let me do your portrait. Let me do your portrait. And that's basically how it started and moved on. A close-up of this piece, showing prickly pear, a little mesquite, and you can see part of the landscape, but also the succulent coming out. This is Lalo. This is the one who plants the trees. This is the one who has the great green thumb. And this, I include in this just for scale, so you have an idea how big the piece is. This is praying plantis that we talked about. And shortly after we put it in, please notice the size of the cholla. That's the cholla today. One thing about succulents, as you may well know, anyone who's worked with plants, man, are they hardy. They're just wonderful. And some of them can go through terrific freezes. You know, prickly pear live in North Dakota, so they can be tremendously hardy. Another view of it, but this is an earlier view of this particular angle. This is a model scaled to show you that idea of a sculpture you would sit inside of. There actually is a little chair in here. This is only about 4 feet tall, but I used the figure to give you a sense of scale and how it works. Another shot of that. This is called G's nose, Gaia. Gaia, as I'm sure many of you know, is like a goddess of nature. And at the time I did it, I didn't really think necessarily it was a head. But then I realized that it really does have a couple of, oh well, that's okay, here we go. A couple of eye spaces. Oh, goodness gracious, I'm going again. Okay, let's see. Here we go. The eye space here. But think about this, because I mean, these are after the fact. You discover these kind of realities sometimes after you do something. Gee whiz, wouldn't it be something if you had a nose that was big enough to plant living plants and trees in that had all the most wonderful smells you liked, and you could smell them all the time? Of course, then maybe you wouldn't appreciate them as much, but you could change them. So in a sense, here's juniper and euonymus, which is the plant. There's the kind of golden plant there. They give you that kind of sense of, you know, I smell the smells I want to smell because they're always in my nose, even the broken one. Another shot of that. This piece called Cornucopia, it has, those are Chilean saguaros. I wanted, because I live so high and because we've had as much as 10 inches of snow up there, I wanted to try and find some saguaros that I could use. And so I went to this place and I asked them, I said, look, it gets pretty cold. Can you have some saguaros that can really grow well? He said, yeah. He said, we got these Chilean ones. I got them. And they'll handle the cold because they come from the Andes. So I put them in there. That giant 5-day freeze, they all died. So I've got Troyas in there now. But I love them in there. I think that there's a quality about them, and I love the kind of symmetry of them, and as a contrast to the organic shape. And this is kind of a close-up. And these are a couple of other pieces in the background. I have a line of 5 pieces that run along here. This is the model, probably a couple feet. I love this piece because the sculpture itself is called Cantilever Black, because I love the blackness of it. And this is wormwood. Wormwood, kind of a green-gray, and it's a beautiful contrast to the black. If I could do the big one, I actually have a model that's 12 feet in scale in plaster that I'm working on right now. And I would put either sunburst locusts or aspens into that center section, just because of the color. That's another kind of foreshortened view of it. There's your baby. Yeah. To do this, we actually, just to give a slight idea, to do this we took the model that I had, which was, as I say, about 3 feet. We took it to Foundry, I don't know if you know it, and they have computers that they can actually reproduce the piece in size, in styrofoam to a large scale, to 12 feet, which we did. Then we took it home to my studio, and we covered with plaster to finish the surface. Then after that was done, we cut it up, took it back to the foundry, and then they cast it. The fact of the matter is, we did the whole thing, we did it within a year. I mean, it got here within a year of the time we started to get it in place here. So it's pretty wonderful how quickly it went. Had some good help, too. This is a reclining figure, which is, I call Earth Wave. Again, as I say, reclining figure. You can see the choias and the different plants that are growing out of it. I like that shadow underneath because it really kind of shows you how it floats. It was at the Botanic Garden up in Denver, Colorado, and really on water, and it was just wonderful. What a wonderful setting it was. Piece is particularly touches me. It's called The Cave. And the cave is really in the inside. Again, the inside of ourselves, because it's really sort of a Buddha up on the rocks in a way. And the interesting part about it was, and this wasn't planned, it just kind of accidentally occurred. The space, you can't see it very well here, but the space in here, when that is open, is almost like, I don't know, like an angel. It really is. The shape of it, the wing, it just looks, spatially, it's an angel. And in nature, it really, sitting outdoors, it's just, yeah. the cave, which is the dark side of ourselves, the angel, which is the light side of ourselves, they're kind of together in that wonderful piece, for me. I don't presume anyone else feels the same way, but these are the way I feel. And that's a kind of a close-up of it. That's 11 feet tall, so you get kind of an idea of scale. These are hoodoos. They're called seated hoodoo and standing hoodoo. The one on the right is the male figure. The one on the left is the female figure. The female figure is much more colorful, which is, I think women are much more colorful, generally. And it's basically pregnant. There's a kind of a rise to the stomach. In the West, hoodoos are large vertical rock formations. The Caracal National Monument is one of the great places in the world for hoodoos. And I mean some that'll be this wide and 100 feet tall. Close up. Okay, not too much longer, almost finished. There were 3 pieces that I had left at Jacksonville University in Florida. And you can imagine, they didn't have much patina on them anyway, because when I did them, I was pretty inept at patinas. But when I did them, they, by the time they came back, they were just crusted and black and grotesquely ugly in the context of the surface color. So I thought, I'm going to do something exciting about these pieces. I'm going to remake them. So this particular piece had no head. It was just arms. It was actually on display at the University of Arizona at the astronomy department without the head, just the arms spread up. They liked it because they thought it suggested going into space, which in some respects I suppose it does. So when I brought back, I remade the head, remade a head, which I never could resolve before, 20 years later. You know, a lot of great musicians and even authors, I mean, Tolstoy took, 10, 12, 15 years to write War and Peace, and Shostakovich, and I mean, if you look at some of they'll say started in 1823 and completed in 1841, stuff like that. So it doesn't make any, what counts is the end product. Maybe it takes a long time, but what counts is your effort over a long period of time to mature even your own mind so you can resolve the vision of what was starting but never completed. So anyway, putting the head in there really brought it to life. And then adding this golden, it's called sun walk. It is as if the sun is walking in its color. It's about 9 feet tall. Bouquet. I mentioned that drawing bouquet idea, which is kind of intriguing me about maybe trying to do one, even if it still ends up just in plaster. Anyway, if you think of the waist where you hold the bouquet, and the plantings and the flowers in the top, and the stems of the legs, and here even is cholla. And then plants will actually be coming out. These are fairly recently as it's put in place. So it doesn't have the plants aren't very voluptuous at this point. Hopefully in a not too distant future it'll get better. That gives you a better idea of it. Bouquet. Red, the head's red, the orange. These colors, this is purple. I mean, the foundryman says, hey, you want to use a little purple? I thought, God, I've never used purple on it. Well, okay, let's try it. Hey, I am stuck on purple now. It's magnificent, it really is. I mean, I guess the key in my ideas to creation is being open, not feeling like you're a closed book and you've got all the answers. I always love that statement. The value of a person may be better determined by questions he asks and the answers he gives. Yeah, it's all these questions coming at you, and you being receptive and stretching the brain, saying, yeah, maybe I can. Maybe that would make it a little better. The backside. There, and you see the piece Arroyo rising to the right. I present this piece, and these are called balance. Balance head to head. Missed it, goofed. Oh, well, that's okay. Head to head, hip to hip. Two figures, just fitted together with plants, sitting on the landscape. Obviously a Buddha idea, and certainly came from the idea of Buddhas. When I did the original figure, I had no idea they would fit that well. They just fit gorgeously. I mean, it's just chance, whatever. Even rainbows. Great, great and glorious rainbows of the Southwest. And boy, we have wonderful ones. Sometimes it seems, in my case, there was a professor named Vincent in the literature department who was specialty on Melville and Wales. Melville. Sometimes he had white hair, so they called him White Whale. I remember people saying that, sort of in jest. He was outstanding in his field. But he had a collection of Buddhas. And one day he said to me, we were at a party or something, wouldn't you like to come over? Because he knew I was a sculptor. He said, wouldn't you like to come over and see my Buddhas? I said, oh, yeah, that'd be interesting. I'm going to tell you my sins. I thought to myself, why could I care about Buddhas? I mean, they're just this boring thing. They all look alike. In my head. Didn't tell him that. Many years later, I don't quite know why, I was in New York, and I went into this gallery, or a woman who had traveled to India a great deal. And she had a number of pieces, of which one was this Buddha, had no head and no left arm. But it was exquisitely drawn, or carved. And it was 11th century. It was a Jain Buddha. Jains are the ones who do not want to, you don't want to breathe anything or kill anything. Vegetarians, obviously. So I bought it, most I've ever spent for a piece of art. Brought it home and lived with it for a couple of years. And I kept thinking, well, why did I do this? What's this about? Then gradually I started doing drawings, and I started expanding this idea of what Buddhas are and what the Buddha is about. And I'm very ignorant of Buddhism or things like that, but there are two things that really attracted me. One, that the Buddha sought a life of balance, the symbol of balance in one's life, whether it's your loves, your family, your relationship with those who are around you, your work, whatever it may be, it was balance. And the other one was, which really hit me, what's outside is inside. What's inside is outside. No division line. No difference. Whatever it is, it's all one and the same. Everything's out there is in here. Everything's in here, sitting out there. And so in my naivete, I decided, okay, I'm going to put these together because I could do each one at $2,500, and I'll put it all together, and I'll sell it for a big price. So I started doing this, and by the way, these are not flat. They look flat, but from the side, they go like this. In other words, it goes up and back. And I thought to myself, well, this will be a great deal, man. Not that I'm a good salesman by art, I'm not. But anyway, then the guy at the foundry says, you're going to have to line this whole thing with steel. What? Yeah. If you want to put it together, you're going to have to line it with steel. So that jumped the cost of it somewhat, quite a bit. But it's a wonderful piece to be, because in a lot of ways it was a beginning. So then I had to keep asking myself, what is this Buddha about? Why? And it's those two things I said, but then I looked back in my childhood and I remember sitting on a sidewalk, many times, watching an ant, watching a person walk by, watch a car go up the road, sitting under a tree, and in my own reality, I was the Buddha child. And I'm not unique. It's in all of us. But all things were one. I was fused into that reality. Time and time again as a child. And it was there inside of me. And living where I live, my nearest neighbor is at least a mile away. And the next nearest one is 2 or 3 miles away. And living out there in that reality and knowing that that was a reality, despite my luxuriousness in many respects, that was the reality of mankind for 200,000 plus years. And when Buddhism arose and these spiritual realities, which certainly preceded them 25,000, 50,000 years ago, because we know art is at least, aspects of art, 75,000 years old. You know. Lalo again, by the way, he's a wonderful cook, a wonderful Mexican cook, among his many skills. About 14 feet tall, called Caracal. Caracal Indians lived in our area. In fact, where I live is the last place where Indians ran free and killed white men in America. Last place was around 1910. It's tragic, a lot of the history of Native Americans. But anyway, they would go across the border. They'd go from Mexico to the United States. Anyway, another shot. Again, it's sort of an honoring of those who walked over this land for 15,000 years. It's my way of honoring them. I'm here because they were there first. They survived, and I'm a recipient of that survival. Not just here, but throughout the world. This piece was another piece of the one I revamped. Bold in color. These are junipers. I was intrigued by the relationship of the architectural shapes here and the pieces here. Organic, architectural, but they still relate. You can see the purple now. That's what happens once you get excited about something. And Lalo again to give you a sense of scale. In looking at this whole reality, and this is the last word, I realized that I wanted to find my place in time so I could give my thanks in time. And ironically, I work with bronze. And a man by the name of Alan Weissman wrote a book, something like After We're Gone. And I think they did a TV program on it, about what deteriorates after that man is created over the years. And that which lasts the longest are satellites that go in space. But the next longest, and it was estimated, are bronze sculptures, or bronze objects, because it takes on its own coating and resists nature in principle. It could last 10 million years. So in that sense, I want to find my place in time. When my father said as a child, you know, there's a caveman that still lives somewhere. I said, what do you mean caveman? I mean, I'm living in Niles, Ohio. People live in caves? Yes, they've been living in caves for a long time. What's that about? So I'm blessed. I'm also with the Amaran Foundation, which is a foundation about the American Indian and the history of Indians in North America. On my land, I can go out and pick I can pick stone chips, 4,000 to 8,000 years old, one a minute. They sat on that land, at least for that long. Anyway, so this is about my thanks and time, and I thank you all for being here and taking the time to listen to this. Thank you very much. I know you may want to get going because that's been kind of long. If there are any questions, let me know. I apologize. I talked longer than I should have. I get excited and I forget time sometimes. Anyway, yeah. Anyone? Yes.
How close are you to the?
I don't hear very well, so you need.
How close are you to the Mexican border? Are you like in the Tucson
I'm
area or
within,
south?
The house on a direct line to Mexican border is probably 10, 12 miles.
Okay.
Yeah, 10 or 12 miles. Yep.
Looking at the heads of the two boys in the a house across the street, it's obvious that you're extremely talented as a realistic sculptor also. Have you had much interest in that, or have you done much in that line, or are those unique for you?
What kind of sculpture?
More realistic portraiture.
I started out doing that, and you can see that I did do that portrait of my wife. But real, shall I say, tight figurative work, I'm not overly interested in. I guess it's because of this portrayal of trying to find a new way through form to give new life to the way we see things. There's a line from Lao Tzu that I love. The form of a thing is not necessarily its shape. What's your shape and what's your form? If I'm going to do a portrait of you, and I could do a portrait of you, I really look for the form, not the shape. Shape is part of it. That gives me something to start from. Doesn't mean that's the part that I end with. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have another studio besides your home studio? Because you referred to that as your small studio.
Yeah, that was the small studio. Yes, the studio is across the valley. It's my old house where I lived. I lived there 25 years, and I still have that property. And it's on 4 acres, and that's where that big studio where you saw all the plasters. So I have that. Yep. Any other questions?
Obviously, is this working? Okay. Obviously, you read a lot. Is there something that has had more impact on you than everything else?
Well, on people, my brother, my wife, you know, in the nature of people, my first wife did. My present wife has been wonderful, phenomenally supportive, and I only say it in the context, it's not everybody who lives 6.5 miles on a dirt road out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I meant a book or something. You know, you were speaking of a lot of things you've read.
Yeah, well, I don't know about reading. I know that about 19, I was at Kent at the time, and I had started on sculpture. In fact, this is what led me probably to the more abstraction. I started on sculpture and was doing portraits primarily, and then I went to a show at the Cleveland Museum of Art, which was a collection of sculptures, contemporary sculptures from the National Gallery. I'm trying to think of a collection in Washington, D.C. They had some Henry Moores. And Henry Moore, he just blindsided me and just had enormous impact on me to see the world in a different light. And what I couldn't understand was how could he make a figure that had a not human head and a somewhat human body, and it was called the Warrior, with a shield. Some of you may have seen that. Anyway, with a shield like this, but it had this strange abstract head with a couple holes through it, and it wasn't a human head. And I thought, how can he speak so much about humanity and not create a human figure like it is? I mean, it just burned at me. And it took me some years until this wonderful man, yes. Nari Gandhi, a wonderful person who came to Kent, had studied with Frank Lloyd Wright, and one day we were talking, and he said to me that phrase that I said, the form of a thing is not necessarily its shape. And when he said that, I thought, my God, that's it. I don't have to copy the shape. I have to find the form. And the form is infinite in its variety within us. Yeah. I don't know, does that help? I mean, that really transcended me. And Nari was very impactful in that way. Yeah. And my friendships with Dick Myers and his wife and Chuck McCleary, those people inspired me. They did. They had impact on me. Yes. Any other questions? No? Thanks an awful lot for being here. I really appreciate your taking the time.